In the United States, a 130-kilometer-long crack formed in the ice of Lake Erie. In Italy, a half-century storm repeated itself twice in 3 weeks. In Argentina, snow suddenly fell in the middle of summer. And in Germany, beneath the waters of a picturesque lake, magma is slowly but surely making its way toward the surface. About this and other most anomalous climatic events of the past week, watch in the episode. United States. Last week, North America was struck by extremely severe weather. The breakdown of the polar vortex opened the way for Arctic air into the northeastern states of the United States, causing extreme cold and unusual weather phenomena. The cold weather has swept across a vast region, from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic coast, affecting the states of New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. This time, the Great Lakes were almost completely covered with ice, whereas usually only certain parts freeze. Lake Erie stood out in particular. The ice cover reached almost 96%, something not recorded since 1996. Due to the combination of severe frost and gusty winds, the ice could not withstand the stress, and on February 8th formed a massive crack, stretching about 130 kilometers. From the coast of Canada to the city of Cleveland in the United States, clearly visible even on satellite images. The worst of the cold snap hit on February 9th and 10th. In New York, the perceived temperature dropped to minus 26 degrees Celsius. Being outdoors became dangerous. Frostbite could occur in just a few minutes. In response, additional warming centers were opened in the city and patrols were intensified. Ice on sidewalks and roads created a serious threat to pedestrians and drivers. As a result, public transportation operated unstably, and there were also delays and cancellations of flights. Utility services were switched to an enhanced mode of operation to restore power supply and eliminate the consequences of frost and icing. In Letchworth Park, due to prolonged cold, a record ice volcano formed. Under pressure, water was ejected outward from a fountain and instantly froze, forming an ice cone, and by February 10th, its height had reached 9 meters. Argentina. In Argentine, Patagonia, on February 10th, in the height of summer, snow unexpectedly fell. After a week of heat up to 30 degrees Celsius, the region was hit by a cold front from the Pacific Ocean carrying polar air. The sharp temperature drop brought heavy snowfall to the high-altitude areas. Fresh snow fell on the famous peak Cerro Catedral near the city of San Carlos de Bariloche and in the mountainous areas around the town of El Bolsón. At elevations above 1,600 meters, temperatures dropped to minus 4 degrees Celsius. Adverse weather conditions not only changed the landscape, but also turned National Route number 40 into a high-risk zone for traffic. Although the snow and rain brought temporary relief to the region, which had previously suffered from severe drought and large-scale wildfires, this became yet another weather anomaly, indicating extreme instability and chaos in the atmosphere. Tropical cyclone Gizani. On February 10th, the intense tropical cyclone Gizani made landfall near the city of Toamasina, the second largest in Madagascar. Eyewitnesses compared what was happening to a continuous roar of a jet engine. Wind gusts of up to 250 kilometers per hour tore off roofs, broke trees, and damaged power lines. Local authorities reported that up to 75% of buildings in some neighborhoods of Toamasina were destroyed. The government declared a national state of emergency. The damage was colossal. Communication lines, power grids, and water supply systems were affected. Roads were blocked by trees and building debris. About 19,000 homes were completely destroyed, and approximately 37,000 were partially damaged. The education sector also suffered serious damage. Hundreds of classrooms were left without roofs. In addition to strong winds, the cyclone brought torrential rains. In low-lying areas, more than 14,000 residential houses and schools were flooded. The disaster affected nearly 270,000 residents of the country. More than 16,000 were forced to leave their homes. Some of the affected people were placed in temporary centers, while others stayed with relatives. Gazani caused the deaths of 41 people across the country, and hundreds more were injured. Moving further, the cyclone struck the coastal province of Inhambane in Mozambique. Wind gusts of up to 215 kilometers per hour knocked down trees and power line poles, leaving more than 13,000 residents without electricity. In several districts of Inhambane, water supply was cut off. In Mozambique, as a result of cyclone Gazani, at least 4 people died. Colombia. On February 11th, a heavy downpour with hail struck the country's capital, Bogotá. The northern districts of the city were hit the hardest. In 1 hour, about 75 millimeters of precipitation fell here, which amounts to almost 70% of the monthly average. Average February monthly norm, 50 millimeters of precipitation, basements and underground garages were flooded. And commercial facilities were damaged. Water penetrated inside. In one of the educational institutions, the roof collapsed. The capital's sports complex, El Campín, was affected. The stadium lawn had to be covered with protective material to prevent damage. A transport collapse occurred on the main highways. Cars were getting stuck in water and icy snowdrifts. Such weather at this time of year is anomalous for Bogotá. January and February are traditionally dry months. It should be emphasized that since the end of January, torrential rains have already affected half of all Colombia's departments. The disaster has caused the deaths of at least 17 people. Large-scale floods and landslides have led to serious destruction. More than 22,000 homes have been damaged, of which 4,000 were completely destroyed. A state of emergency has been declared in the country. Storm Niels. On the night of February 12th, Storm Niels hit France. On the island of Corsica, a wind gust of 185 kilometers per hour was recorded, the highest figure for the region since 2009. The greatest impact was felt by residents of the regions of Nouvelle-Aquitaine and Occitanie. In the past 17 years, natural events of such magnitude had not occurred here. Due to flooding, landslides, and fallen trees, transportation and life support systems were disrupted. Up to 900,000 consumers were left without electricity. In several cities, water supply was suspended. On the southern coast of the island of Corsica, the storm generated waves about 8 meters high. At the airport, wind gusts tore off part of the terminal roof with an area of 60 square meters.
And devastating sight.
In the affected regions, up to 150 millimeters of precipitation fell in some places over 72 hours. The soil was already saturated with moisture, causing many rivers, including the Garonne and its tributaries, to overflow their banks.
In such a short period of time, since mid-January at least.
In the department of Charente, in the region of Nouvelle-Aquitaine, 66 residents of a nursing home located by the river were evacuated. After strong crosswinds overturned several trucks, a section of the A9 motorway had to be temporarily closed. In the Alps, up to 100 centimeters of snow fell within a short period. The new layer settled on an unstable snowpack, triggering powerful avalanches. Some ski resorts temporarily suspended operations. In several departments of the country, for the first time, the red alert level was activated simultaneously for 3 parameters: avalanche danger, strong wind, and flood threat.
Steadily risen after weeks of relentless.
In France, 2 people died as a result of the storm.
2 department.
Storm Niels became the 8th storm in Spain since the beginning of the year. The highest level of alert was declared in the autonomous communities of Galicia, Cantabria, and the Basque Country. In Catalonia, the strongest winds in the past 20 years were recorded. Transportation was disrupted. Businesses and institutions were closed. And all non-urgent medical appointments were postponed. In the city of Alicante, carnival celebrations and Saturday markets were cancelled.
Per hour was recorded at the port.
Football matches of the Valencian Federation also did not take place.
Thursday morning.
As a result of the storm, at least 25 people were injured in the country. 5 were taken to hospital, 1 with serious injuries. Italy. On February 12th, Italy was struck by a storm named Harry Bis. Similar to the January storm, Harry, it hit Sardinia, Sicily, and Calabria, accompanied by destructive winds and strong storm surges. In the open sea, waves up to 9 meters high were observed. On the island of Sardinia, in the town of Villasimius, the wind tore the roof off a school building. Debris struck the windows. This greatly frightened the students. In Porto Torres, wind gusts exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, and storm surge caused the stern mooring line of a ferry to snap, and it broke free from its anchor. Meteorologists believed that such an extreme storm as Harry occurs once every 50 years. However, a cyclone of comparable strength struck Italy again just 21 days later. Indonesia. On February 12th, strong winds with heavy rain struck the city of Cibinong in Indonesia. The storm lasted only about 15 minutes, but left significant destruction behind. The sports complex, the pride of Bogor Regency, suffered the greatest damage. People panicked and sought shelter from debris from the stadium roof, flying through the air. 1 person was injured. The sudden squall tore roofs off more than 70 homes. Wind gusts knocked down trees, market stalls, and overturned motorcycles. The storm severely reduced visibility, forcing drivers to stop their vehicles to avoid collisions with trees and construction debris flying onto the road. Seismic and volcanic activity. Last week, the planet experienced another series of strong earthquakes. There were no casualties, but the abnormally high frequency of tremors keeps residents of seismically active regions in constant tension. In the Fiji Islands area on February 10th, a deep focus earthquake with a magnitude of 6.2 was recorded. Its focus was located at a depth of over 500 kilometers, which is why the tremors were not felt on the surface. In the same region, on February 14th, an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.4 occurred off the coast of Vanuatu. Residents of the Port Olri resort described the tremors as very strong. The shaking lasted about a minute, but no damage was reported. In the Coquimbo region of Chile on February 12th, a seismic event with a magnitude of 6.1 was recorded. The epicenter was located in Fray Jorge National Park, and the tremors were felt from Atacama to Ñuble, and also in neighboring Argentina. The main consequences were landslides and rock falls, significant in some places. In several communes, local roads were blocked by debris. An earthquake with a magnitude of 4.8 occurred on the night of February 10th in the southern part of Krasnodar Krai. Seismic events of this strength are extremely rare for this region. The underground tremors woke residents of the cities of Anapa and Novorossiysk. Videos of swaying chandeliers, shaking windows, and rising rumbling quickly spread on social media. The earthquake was also felt in neighboring regions. No serious damage was recorded, but some buildings in Anapa developed cracks. In the Far Eastern Federal District, 2 more seismic events with a magnitude of 6 were recorded. On February 11th, in the Sea of Okhotsk, off the coast of Khabarovsk Krai, and on February 15th, in the northern Kurils, east of Matua Island. Kamchatka continues to experience high seismic activity. Since July 30th of last year, when a mega earthquake with a magnitude of 8.8 occurred, more than 35,000 tremors have been recorded, with magnitudes remaining extremely high nearly 7 months later, and some events exceeding a magnitude of 6. Kamchatka's volcanoes remain active. At Shivelush, ash emissions regularly reach heights of up to 11.6 kilometers since February 5th. The Krasheninnikov volcano, which awoke after almost 500 years of dormancy, has been continuously erupting lava since August 2nd, 2025. In recent years, seismic and volcanic activity has noticeably increased. We have already discussed the reasons for this in previous editions. Erupting volcanoes create numerous problems. They disrupt air traffic, cover cities with ash, worsen air quality, and pose a direct threat to people. Nevertheless, their behavior is usually subject to monitoring and forecasting. Much greater concern is caused by hidden giants. Their activity can remain unnoticed for a long time, but a single powerful eruption can destroy life over a vast area. These are supervolcanoes. The Lake Erie supervolcano, one of the most dangerous volcanoes in Europe, is hidden in western Germany. Its last eruption occurred approximately 13,000 years ago and had a VEI of 6. During a few days of this eruption, approximately 6.5 cubic kilometers of magma were ejected. Although today the volcano appears completely calm, observations in recent years indicate ongoing and increasing magmatic activity beneath it. Elevated emissions of magmatic CO2 are being recorded, and the ground surface is gradually rising at a rate of several millimeters per year. Studies show that since 2013, episodic deep, low-frequency earthquakes have been recorded under the Lake Erie supervolcano, caused by the movement of magmatic fluids in the upper mantle and lower crust. From September 2022 to August 2023, Germany conducted the largest seismological experiment in the country's history. Nearly 500 seismic stations and 64 kilometers of fiber optic cable were used to collect data. The research zone covered the area around the Lake Erie volcano. Seismic stations were spaced up to 2 kilometers apart, allowing even earthquakes with a magnitude of less than 1 to be recorded. The experiment recorded more than 1,000 micro-earthquakes, mostly along the narrow vertical Ochtendung seismic zone at depths from 10 to 16 kilometers. The tremors occurred episodically in packages of 4 to 11 events and lasted up to 2 days. Tomography revealed a magmatic reservoir beneath the Lake Erie volcano in the upper crust, shaped as a cylindrical anomaly reaching a depth of about 10 kilometers. Previous studies had shown a magma and fluid ascent channel from the mantle. Geochemical analysis of gases also indicates that the reservoir under Lake Erie is fed by mantle sources. In the Eifel volcanic region, where the German supervolcano is located, there has been a sharp increase in microseismic activity since the beginning of 2023. On October 10th, 2025, an unusual series of 92 earthquakes was recorded under the western slope of Lake Erie. The largest tremor, with a magnitude of 0.9, occurred at a depth of 7 kilometers. Although the earthquakes were too weak to be felt by residents, the event is considered exceptional. The volcano observer noted that this is the first case of its kind in his 25 years of practice. Thus, the research results and recent anomalous seismic episodes confirm that the magmatic reservoir under the Lake Erie supervolcano remains active and may be under increased pressure, and the micro-earthquakes in its vicinity indicate ongoing accumulation of magma and fluids. In simple terms, living on the shore of a calm and beautiful lake, like the Lake Sea caldera, does not exclude the possibility that something serious and dangerous is brewing beneath its depths.
Main airport remains.
2 destructive storms in Europe, record-breaking snowfalls in Japan, anomalous cold in the Caribbean, an unseasonal tropical storm in the Philippines. In today's issue, we cover these and other climate events of the past week. Anomalous cold. Almost the entire Central Federal District of Russia came under the influence of anomalous cold in early February. In many regions, extremely low temperatures were recorded, more typical of Siberian regions than of the European part of the country. Abnormal frosts in the Penza, Belgorod, Voronezh, and Kursk regions were accompanied by temperature drops to -30 degrees Celsius and below, while average daily values were 19 to 23 degrees lower than the climatic norm. In the Komi Republic, the most severe frost was recorded, nearly -42 degrees Celsius. It should be noted that the extreme frosts lasted not just one day, but persisted for an extended period. Against the backdrop of the warm and mild winters of recent years, this appears especially striking. In Moscow, temperatures were significantly lower than typical February values. On the 3rd of February, -21.6 degrees Celsius was recorded in the capital, while the average minimum for the month here is -8.8 degrees Celsius. Lithuania also came under the grip of anomalous cold, intense snowfall, and gusty winds. In the city of Shedova, on the 2nd of February, the temperature dropped to -34.3 degrees Celsius. Such frost had not been recorded in the country for 30 years. Due to extreme weather conditions, public transportation operated with disruptions, and some schools switched to remote learning. Extremely low temperatures caused severe tension and breakage of overhead power lines. About 10,000 people were left without electricity. Residents kept their stoves burning around the clock to protect themselves from the cold. At least 30 people suffered hypothermia and frostbite of the extremities, sometimes with the threat of amputation. As a result of the extreme cold, 3 people died in the country. Ukraine was also struck by severe frosts. In early February, in the north and west of the country, thermometers dropped to -30 degrees Celsius, and authorities declared a red level of danger. In Kyiv, due to worsening weather and a sharp drop in temperature, the Kyiv-Pechersk-Lavra was temporarily closed to visitors. An unusual natural phenomenon occurred in the Zaporizhzhia region. The Sea of Azov froze for more than 200 meters from the shore. Local residents note that such cases have not occurred for at least 15 years. In the Kirovohrad region, frost of -22 degrees Celsius caused the soil to freeze to a depth of half a meter, while the upper layer of fields became covered with an ice crust. Specialists note that such weather conditions pose a serious threat to the survival of winter crops such as rapeseed, barley, and wheat. In Cuba, on the 3rd of February, for the first time in the entire history of observations, the thermometer dropped to 0 degrees Celsius. Vegetation near the weather station was covered with frost, a cold air mass spread across most of the country. At 32 weather stations, temperatures dropped to +10 degrees Celsius and below, an extremely unusual phenomenon for the tropics. It was also anomalously cold in the Bahamas. In the city of Freeport, the temperature dropped to 10.8 degrees Celsius, which became the lowest temperature ever recorded in the country. In Guatemala, a national record for minimum temperature was also set. Storm Marta. Just a few days later, on the 7th of February, the new storm Marta struck Spain and Portugal. It hit soil already saturated with moisture, which intensified the flooding. South of Lisbon, on mainland Portugal, the storm brought heavy downpours and strong winds with gusts exceeding 70 kilometers per hour. More than 100,000 residents were left without electricity. Due to severe weather conditions, 3 municipalities postponed the presidential elections scheduled for the 8th of February. The disaster claimed the lives of 2 people. Southern and western Spain were hit by continuous downpours. According to farmers, the damage to crops is catastrophic. Thousands of hectares of broccoli, carrots, and cauliflower were submerged underwater. In lowland areas, water flooded citrus plantations, orchards, and pastures. In Almeria province, hurricane-force winds destroyed vegetable greenhouses and also damaged rural roads and access routes to farms. Storm Leonardo. Storm Leonardo, which has already become the 6th this year, once again brought serious Hispania to residents of southern Europe. The elements struck the Iberian Peninsula with downpours classified as extraordinary. Portugal and Spain found themselves at the epicenter of the natural disaster. The overflowing Sado River turned the streets of the town of Alcácer do Sal into rushing torrents. And in some places, the water level reached 2 meters. People stated that they had never encountered such a powerful force of water before. Playgrounds, homes, and businesses were flooded. Floods, landslides, and fallen trees forced more than 200 residents to leave their homes. In Portugal, a state of emergency was declared in 69 districts of the country. After crossing the Pyrenees, the storm struck Andalusia in Spain. More than 7,000 residents were evacuated. Classes in schools were massively cancelled, and seaports were closed throughout the region. Railway connections on strategically important routes were seriously disrupted, and about 50 highways were closed. Due to strong winds at the major Malaga Costa del Sol airport, a passenger aircraft was unable to land, and many flights were redirected to other regions of Spain. In just 16 hours, more than 400 millimeters of precipitation fell on the mountain town of Grazalema, nearly the annual norm. Water penetrated through the walls of houses and flowed in streams down narrow stone streets, turning the tourist town into a disaster zone. Residents were forced to break openings in exterior walls to drain the water, as there were no other options. Many were urgently evacuated and placed in temporary shelters in nearby Ronda. In Germany, on the 5th of February, snowfall and freezing rain paralyzed Berlin airport. Since morning, all flight operations were suspended as it was impossible to clear ice from the aircraft. The layer of de-icing fluid froze before a second protective layer could be applied. North Africa was also affected by Storm Leonardo. In Morocco, heavy rains caused rivers and reservoirs to overflow their banks. Sudden floods and landslides forced 108,000 people to urgently leave their homes. In Larache province, a landslide destroyed a house in which 3 women were killed. The disaster claimed 2 more lives in Portugal and Spain. Japan. Since the 20th of January, Japan has been struck by the most severe snow disaster in decades, affecting 15 prefectures, causing significant infrastructure destruction and claiming dozens of lives. The most affected areas were those along the coast of the Sea of Japan. The snow cover in Aomori Prefecture on the 1st of February reached 183 centimeters, nearly 3 times the climatic norm. Aomori was virtually paralyzed. Snow blockages led to school closures and power supply disruptions. For the first time since 2005, authorities appealed to the self-defense forces for assistance in clearing roofs and supporting elderly people living alone. By the morning of the 3rd of February, in several prefectures, the situation crossed a critical threshold. In some places, snow cover reached 146 centimeters, which became an absolute record for the entire observation period. Starting from the 6th of February, Hokkaido Prefecture was also struck by powerful blizzards. In the city of Wakkanai, wind gusts reached 31 meters per second. On the day of the general elections, the 8th of February, heavy snowfall paralyzed transportation. More than 270 flights were cancelled, including those connecting Haneda and Osaka airports with other regions of the country. On the Tokaido and Sanyo lines, Shinkansen high-speed trains operated with delays. On the same day in Tokyo, where 5 centimeters of snow fell, a multi-vehicle accident involving 7 cars occurred on an icy bridge. 6 people were injured. At Hosei and Chuo universities, the start times of entrance examinations were postponed due to heavy snowfall. A break in the overhead contact line in the metropolitan region completely paralyzed traffic on the critically important Utsunomiya railway line, causing a severe transportation collapse. Record snowfalls claimed the lives of at least 42 people across the country. The main cause of death was falls from roofs while clearing snow. Philippines. Over the warm waters of the Philippine Sea, on the 3rd of February, a tropical system rapidly formed, which in just 2 days intensified into tropical storm Penha. On the night of the 5th of February, it struck Surigao del Sur province on the island of Mindanao. Despite relatively weak winds, about 60 kilometers per hour, the main danger lay in the extensive precipitation zone, up to 660 kilometers wide, which within hours triggered floods and landslides. In the central and southern regions of the Philippines, rivers overflowed their banks. Torrential rains damaged roads and partially isolated populated areas. The city of Iligan and surrounding areas of Misamis Oriental Province were particularly affected. Water rapidly flooded low-lying districts, washing away homes along riverbanks and carrying vehicles downstream. Residents urgently evacuated to higher ground, but some remained trapped in their homes. In the city of Cagayan de Oro, torrential rains caused a landslide that buried a residential house, resulting in the death of a family of 4. Nearly 80 seaports across the country were closed, leaving thousands of passengers stranded. After passing through the Philippines, the storm affected about 500,000 people and forced tens of thousands to evacuate. As a result of the disaster, 12 people died. Concern is growing because tropical storm Penha, accompanied by heavy rainfall, formed significantly earlier than the usual typhoon season in the Philippines, which typically begins in May. Kazakhstan. The city of Janatas in the Jambal region came under the force of hurricane-strength winds that caused significant damage to infrastructure. The storm began on the evening of the 5th of February, and by the morning of the following day, wind gusts had reached 36 meters per second. The powerful wind tore roofing and facade cladding from multi-story residential buildings. 8 commercial facilities and the House of Culture building were damaged. Wind gusts damaged approximately 2 kilometers of power lines and knocked down about 30 trees. In addition, transportation was affected. In some parts of the city, temporary power outages occurred. For safety reasons, 15 schools switched to remote learning. According to research data, winds exceeding 17.2 meters per second occur in Janatas, on average, no more than 5 hours per year. However, during this storm, sustained wind speeds remained at an anomalously high level for nearly 24 hours, ranging from 17 to 31 meters per second. This week's events once again draw attention to one of the most dangerous features of modern cataclysms, their synchronization. Natural disasters now occur not as isolated incidents, but as a wave, an entire cascade, where one event triggers another. Such interconnection increases progression and accelerates the destruction of our planet. Scientists from ALLATRA recorded the first signs of synchronization of natural disasters in 2020 and reported them to the global community. It then became evident that the climate had entered a new level, where events occur simultaneously in different regions, reinforcing each other and multiplying the damage. Even then, it was clear time was limited, and action had to be taken immediately. However, humanity missed the opportunity to implement scientifically grounded technologies that ALLATRA scientists had proposed for climate stabilization. The result is what we observe today. The synchronization of cataclysms has reached such a scale that residents of some countries do not have time to recover from one disaster before the next one strikes. People are living in a continuous climate nightmare. Europe clearly demonstrates the scale of the problem. Less than 1.5 months of 2026 have passed, and some countries have already experienced 7 storms in succession. More clearly than any words, statistics. The graph of storm winds in Europe speaks for itself, and no commentary is necessary. All of this serves as a reminder of the value of time and the need to act immediately. While there is still a scientific foundation, laboratories, monitoring centers, and specialists capable of finding a solution, more and more people understand that destructive processes will not stop without conscious human intervention. That is why hundreds of thousands of people are already sharing this information with friends, acquaintances, and their communities, realizing that only a shared understanding of the scale of the crisis by all people on the planet can accelerate the search for a solution. They act for the sake of life, their own and that of their children.
عمر وبلال قايمين من الواجب ديالهم من الحي مكلاتة هما كينقذوا الناس واقفين مع الحي.
A avaliação não é possível fazer num momento desse, terá que ser feita a posterior, portanto, mas acima de tudo o que temos, portanto, é um volumar de detritos e...
The destructive storm Leonardo, already the 6th since the beginning of the year, raged from February 2nd through February 7th and became a serious challenge for the countries of southern Europe. It brought torrential rains to the Iberian Peninsula, which meteorological services described as extraordinary.
Esta está bem quieto.
The most severe situation developed in Portugal and Spain. In Portugal, the Sado River overflowed its banks and flooded the streets of the city of Alcácer do Sal, located approximately 56 miles south of Lisbon. In some areas, the water level rose to more than 6 feet. Local residents admitted they had never before experienced flooding of such magnitude. Homes, businesses, and playgrounds were submerged. Due to flooding, landslides, and falling trees, more than 200 people were forced to leave their homes. In 69 districts of the country, authorities declared a state of emergency.
Ya sí, de huevo, ha vuelto a partir otra vez, ya no podemos pasar del Lirón.
After crossing the Pyrenees, the storm struck Spain. In Andalusia, more than 7,000 people were evacuated, school classes were canceled, Seaports were closed, rail service on key routes was nearly brought to a halt, and approximately 31 miles of major highways were shut down. At Malaga, Costa del Sol Airport, hurricane-force winds prevented a passenger aircraft from landing, and many flights were diverted to other regions of the country. An especially severe situation developed in the mountain town of Grazalema. In just 16 hours, more than 15 3/4 inches of rain fell, while the average annual total is about 16 3/4 inches. Water streamed through building walls and rushed down the narrow stone streets, turning the tourist town into a disaster zone. To save their homes, residents broke openings in exterior walls to release the water. Many families were urgently evacuated and housed in temporary shelters in the city of Ronda. In Portugal and Spain, the storm claimed 2 lives. On February 5th, Germany also felt the effects of the severe weather. In Berlin, heavy snowfall and freezing rain completely suspended operations at the airport. De-icing fluid froze on aircraft even before the second protective layer could be applied. The storm also affected North Africa. In Morocco, torrential rains caused rivers and reservoirs to overflow. Sudden flooding and landslides forced the urgent evacuation of approximately 67,000 people. In Larache province, a landslide destroyed a residential building, killing 3 women. However, the ordeal did not end there. On February 7th, almost immediately after Leonardo departed, another storm, Marta, struck Spain and Portugal. The soil, already saturated with moisture, was no longer capable of absorbing rainwater, significantly worsening the flooding and making the situation even more dangerous. South of Lisbon, Marta brought torrential rains and wind gusts exceeding 43 miles per hour. More than 100,000 people were left without electricity. Due to adverse weather conditions, presidential elections scheduled for February 8th were postponed in 3 municipalities. The storm claimed 2 more lives in the country. Southern and western Spain once again found themselves under continuous downpours. Farmers reported catastrophic crop damage. Thousands of acres of broccoli, carrots, and cauliflower were flooded. In low-lying areas, citrus plantations, orchards, and pastures were submerged. In Almeria province, strong winds destroyed greenhouses and ruined vegetable crops, and rural roads and farm access routes were damaged. The example of Europe clearly shows how events are unfolding. Less than 1.5 months of the year 2026 have passed, and some countries have already endured 7 consecutive storms. Natural disasters today do not occur in isolation but form an entire cascade of climate events, with one triggering another. This synchronization increases progression and accelerates the destruction of our planet. Scientists of ALLATRA recorded the first signs of synchronization of natural disasters back in 2020 and informed the global community, but their words went unheard. Today, we see the consequences. The synchronization of natural disasters has reached such a scale that in a number of countries, people barely recover from one catastrophe before the next one strikes. Their lives are turning into an unending climate nightmare. This serves as a reminder of the value of time. Action must be taken without delay while the scientific base, laboratories, monitoring centers, and specialists capable of finding solutions still exist.
Yan. Oo, tol. Naguba, no? So,
On February 3rd, a tropical system began rapidly forming over the warm waters of the Philippine Sea. In just 2 days, it intensified into Tropical Storm Penha, known in the Philippines as Bayang. The storm triggered severe flooding and landslides across the central and southern parts of the Philippines. On the night of February 5th, the storm made landfall in the province of Surigao del Sur on the island of Mindanao. Although wind speeds were relatively moderate, about 37 miles per hour, the primary threat came not from the gusts, but from a vast cloud system with a rain band stretching up to approximately 410 miles wide. Within hours, torrential rains inundated vast areas. Rivers overflowed their banks, communities were flooded and partially cut off, and roads were destroyed. The flooding affected the provinces of Agusan del Norte, Surigao del Sur, Lanao del Norte, Misamis Oriental, and other areas.
Sila, masuwat na ganyan. Paggawas dira is Iligan Capital College.
The situation was particularly severe in the city of Iligan and nearby parts of Misamis Oriental. Surging floodwaters swept through low-lying neighborhoods, washing away homes along the shoreline and carrying vehicles downstream. Residents rushed to evacuate to higher ground, while some were trapped inside their houses. In Cagayan de Oro, heavy rains triggered a landslide that buried a residential home, killing a family of 4. As the storm moved across the country, nearly 80 seaports were closed, leaving thousands of passengers stranded. Overall, the disaster affected around 500,000 people, with tens of thousands forced to evacuate. 12 people lost their lives. What is particularly alarming is that Penha developed well before the usual start of the Philippine typhoon season, which typically begins in May, bringing significant rainfall and destruction at such an early point in the year. This fact once again underscores that climate-related disasters are becoming not only more intense and large-scale, but also increasingly unpredictable, leaving people extremely vulnerable to their impact. What is driving this escalation of natural catastrophes? And which of the still remaining possible pathways for stabilizing planetary natural anomalies has been proposed by the international scientific community ALLATRA? The answers are presented in the address by Dr. Egan Chalakian.